Leonard West adjusted his cufflinks as he stood in the mirror, exuding the confidence of a self-made billionaire. Tonight was the night. Everything was meticulously planned: the private dining room of Lucille, the city's most exclusive restaurant, a string quartet playing softly in the background, and a flawless $200,000 engagement ring tucked inside his pocket. His girlfriend, Amelia Carter, had no idea what was coming, and that's how Leonard wanted it. She was everything he imagined for his future: poised, elegant, and a perfect match for his public image. As they entered the restaurant, the maitre d' greeted Leonard with a bow and led them to their table, positioned with a view of the dazzling skyline. Amelia gasped in delight at the luxurious setup. Leonard's lips curved into a smile, pleased with her reaction. He ordered a vintage bottle of wine, and their evening began with soft laughter and conversation about their future. But then, as the waiter approached their table with the first course, Leonard froze. The waitress walking behind him carried a tray with careful precision, her gaze focused downward. Despite her attempt to remain inconspicuous, there was no mistaking her: Clara Hayes. The sight of her sent an unexpected jolt through Leonard's chest. The last time he had seen Clara was over a decade ago, and she had vanished from his life without a word. Leonard struggled to focus on Amelia's chatter, his thoughts circling back to Clara. What was she doing here, dressed in a modest black uniform, balancing plates and glasses for strangers? It seemed impossible to reconcile the vibrant, ambitious woman he once knew with this image. Clara had been his first love, the person who believed in him when he had nothing but dreams. But that was a lifetime ago, before the betrayal that left him bitter and determined to bury his past. Amelia noticed his distraction. "Leonard, is everything all right?" she asked, tilting her head in concern. He snapped back to reality and forced a smile. "Of course, darling. Just thinking about how perfect this evening is." Yet, as the evening progressed, Leonard's gaze kept drifting toward Clara, who moved about the restaurant with practiced grace, as if unaware of his presence. Clara had spotted Leonard the moment he walked in, his commanding presence impossible to miss. Her heart sank as memories she had long suppressed came rushing back. For years, she had avoided the circles of wealth and power Leonard now dominated, preferring the anonymity of her quiet life. And yet, fate had thrown them together in the last place she expected. She kept her head down, moving swiftly between tables, praying he wouldn't recognize her. Her son, Alex, needed her job at this restaurant. The tips were good, and the hours allowed her to juggle work and caring for him. But now, the past she had worked so hard to leave behind was staring her in the face, threatening to unravel everything she had built. Leonard's stare burned into her as she delivered plates to a nearby table. She could feel the weight of his questions even though no words were spoken. When their eyes met briefly, Clara's hands trembled, and she nearly dropped a tray of champagne glasses. She quickly turned away, retreating to the safety of the kitchen, but her pulse raced with every step. Leonard could no longer resist. As Clara disappeared into the kitchen, he made an excuse to Amelia and followed her. The buzz of the dining room faded as he stepped into the back, where Clara was carefully arranging plates on a tray. She stiffened when she felt his presence. "Clara," Leonard said, his voice low but commanding. She turned slowly, her face calm, though her eyes betrayed her apprehension. "Mr. West," she replied, her tone polite but distant. "Can I help you with something?" "Don't Mr. West me," he snapped. "What are you doing here?" "How, why?" He struggled to form the questions that had been plaguing him all night. Clara set the tray down and crossed her arms, her voice steady. "I'm working, Leonard. Just like anyone else. Now, If you'll excuse me. This is ridiculous, he interrupted. We need to talk. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, she looked as though she might argue. But then she shook her head. Not here, she whispered, glancing toward the dining room. This isn't the time or place. Reluctantly, Leonard stepped aside, letting her pass. But his curiosity and frustration only deepened. Whatever secrets Clara was hiding, he was determined to uncover them. Back at the table, Leonard's thoughts were a whirlwind. Clara's presence had reopened wounds he thought had healed. He remembered the late nights they spent dreaming about the future, the sacrifices she made to support him during his struggling years, and the way she vanished without a trace. He had never understood why, and now, seeing her here, it was as if the universe was demanding answers. Amelia's voice brought him back to the present. Leonard, you're a million miles away. Is something wrong? Nothing, he lied, forcing a smile. Just tired from the week. But even as he spoke, his eyes wandered to Clara, who moved about the room with the same quiet determination that had once captivated him. Leonard didn't wait for the evening to end before taking action. As soon as Amelia excused herself to freshen up, he approached Clara again, this time catching her in the narrow hallway leading to the staff lounge. She froze when she saw him, her expression a mixture of wariness and defiance. We're not finished, Clara, Leonard said firmly. You owe me an explanation. Clara sighed, her shoulders slumping under the weight of his gaze. What explanation could I possibly give that would make you understand? It's been over 10 years, Leonard. Whatever we had, it's gone. Gone? He repeated, incredulous. You vanished without a word, Clara. I spent years wondering why. And now I find you here, working as a waitress? This doesn't make sense. She looked him square in the eye. My life doesn't have to make sense to you. People move on, Leonard. You did, didn't you? Her gaze flickered toward the dining room, where Amelia's laughter echoed faintly. That's not the point, he argued, his voice rising slightly. I deserve to know the truth. Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. The truth, she said quietly, is that I did what I had to do. You wouldn't understand. Before he could respond, she brushed past him, leaving him standing alone in the dimly lit hallway, consumed by questions he couldn't answer. In the quiet sanctuary of the staff lounge, Clara leaned against a counter, her breath shaky. Seeing Leonard again had reopened a flood of emotions she had buried long ago. The years had not been kind to her, and every choice she made since leaving him was shaped by circumstances she could barely control. She thought of Alex, her 10-year-old son, waiting at home with his babysitter. He was the reason she worked double shifts, the reason she endured humiliation from demanding customers, and the reason she had no time for self-pity. Leonard had no place in her life now, not after everything that had happened. Still, the way he looked at her, hurt and confused, made her chest ache. Clara had always told herself she had made the right decision, but tonight, for the first time in years, she felt a sliver of doubt. Back at the table, Amelia noticed Leonard's tension. You've been acting strange all night, she remarked as they sipped their wine. Is there something you're not telling me? Leonard hesitated, his mind racing. He couldn't exactly explain the situation without revealing his connection to Clara. It's nothing, he said finally, forcing a smile. Just some work issues I've been thinking about. Amelia didn't look convinced, but she let the matter drop. Still, Leonard could feel her watching him closely, her curiosity piqued by his unusual behavior. After dinner, Leonard lingered near the restaurant entrance, waiting for Clara to finish her shift. When she finally emerged, he intercepted her on the sidewalk. "Leonard," she said tiredly, "what do you want from me?" "I need to understand," he said. "You walked out of my life, and now you're back, working as a waitress. Why? What happened to you?" Clara hesitated, then sighed. "If you really want to know, Leonard, my father racked up debts I couldn't repay. I left to save my family, not because I didn't care about you." Her voice wavered, but she kept her composure. "I couldn't drag you into my mess." Leonard was stunned. "And the boy?" he asked, his voice softer. "Is he mine?" Her eyes widened briefly before narrowing. "No. Alex isn't your son. But that doesn't mean you get to interrogate me about my life." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Leonard rooted to the spot, grappling with the weight of her words. When Leonard returned to Amelia, he found her waiting by his car, her arms crossed. "So," she began, her tone icy, "are you going to tell me what's really going on, or do I have to guess?" Leonard sighed, realizing he couldn't keep deflecting. "There's nothing to worry about, Amelia. I ran into someone I used to know, that's all." "Someone you used to know?" she repeated, her voice rising. "That waitress? Is this why you've been acting so strange all night?" "It's complicated," he admitted, but Amelia didn't want to hear it. "No, Leonard. What's complicated is that I've spent this entire evening feeling like a third wheel at my own proposal dinner," she snapped. "I deserve better." Without another word, she turned on her heel and hailed a cab, leaving Leonard alone on the curb. Leonard watched Amelia's cab disappear into the night, a sense of failure settling over him. For years, he had built his life around control, controlling his business, his image, and his relationships. But tonight, everything felt beyond his grasp. Clara's sudden reappearance had stirred something in him, something he couldn't ignore. He knew he should let her go, focus on repairing things with Amelia. But deep down, he felt a pull he couldn't explain, a need to understand why fate had brought Clara back into his life. Clara returned home to her small apartment, exhausted but relieved to find Alex fast asleep. The babysitter, Mrs. Jenkins, a kind elderly woman from their building, smiled softly as she handed over her coat. "He's such a bright boy," she said, her voice tinged with affection. "Spent all evening working on his school project." Clara forced a smile as she thanked Mrs. Jenkins and paid her. Closing the door, she leaned against it, allowing the day's weight to settle on her shoulders. Her thoughts drifted back to Leonard and the confrontation she'd hoped to avoid. Their lives were worlds apart now, and she had fought too hard to create a stable life for Alex to let Leonard's sudden reappearance jeopardize it. She walked into Alex's room, watching him sleep. His peaceful expression reminded her why she endured so much, the grueling shifts, the condescension from customers, the never-ending bills. Alex was her reason for everything. Whatever memories Leonard had brought back, Clara resolved to keep them buried. The present demanded her focus. Leonard couldn't sleep. He spent the night replaying his conversations with Clara, grappling with emotions he hadn't felt in years. Something about her story didn't sit right with him. Why had she endured so much alone? And why had she chosen to work at a place frequented by people like him? The next morning, Leonard instructed his assistant, Emily, to find out everything she could about Clara. Emily hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Are you sure, sir? This feels personal." "It is," Leonard admitted. But I need to know the truth. Within hours, Emily returned with a file. Leonard sat at his desk, flipping through the pages. The reports painted a picture of struggle and sacrifice. Clara's father had gambled away their family's savings, leaving Clara to pick up the pieces. The debts she paid had cost her everything: her dreams, her stability, and her future with Leonard. As he read further, Leonard found details about Alex. The boy was bright, excelling in school despite limited resources. Leonard's heart ached as he realized how much Clara had endured alone. He couldn't ignore this newfound knowledge, nor could he dismiss the guilt gnawing at him. "Maybe you should talk to her again," Emily suggested cautiously as Leonard shared what he had learned. Leonard frowned. "She won't listen. She made that clear." "Then try a different approach," Emily urged. "Show her you're not the same man she walked away from. If you truly care about helping her, don't make it about you." Leonard considered her words. For years, he had defined success through power and control. But Clara's resilience had forced him to reevaluate what mattered. Maybe it was time to set his pride aside and focus on making amends. Determined, Leonard visited Clara again. This time, he waited outside the restaurant until her shift ended. When she emerged, he stepped forward, his expression earnest. "What now, Leonard?" Clara asked, her voice weary. "I'm not here to argue," he said gently. I need to know. Is Alex really not my son?" Clara's eyes softened for a moment before she answered. "He isn't. I met someone else after I left. It didn't last, but Alex came from that. He's my entire world, Leonard. And I won't let anything disrupt his life." Leonard nodded, his chest tightening with relief and guilt. "I'm not trying to disrupt anything. I just want to help." "Help?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity," Leonard said firmly. "It's the least I can do." The next day, Leonard returned to the restaurant, sitting in Clara's section. A particularly rude customer loudly berated her for an imagined mistake, drawing the attention of the entire dining room. Leonard intervened, standing and addressing the man. "You've made your point. Now leave her alone." His commanding tone silenced the room. Clara looked at him, her expression unreadable. As the customer muttered an apology and left, she whispered, "I didn't need saving." "Maybe not," Leonard replied, "but you didn't deserve that." Leonard continued learning about Clara's life, speaking discreetly to people who knew her. He uncovered the depth of her sacrifices, how she worked multiple jobs to pay off her father's debts, how she fought to keep Alex in school despite financial struggles. He felt a mix of admiration and shame. Clara's strength and resilience were undeniable, and he realized how little he had understood about her choices. One weekend, Leonard visited Clara's neighborhood, hoping to understand her world better. To his surprise, Alex approached him outside a grocery store. "Are you my mom's friend?" Alex asked, his bright eyes curious. Leonard hesitated before nodding. "I used to be. I'm trying to be again." Alex smiled. "She doesn't have many friends. You should try harder." The boy's words lingered with Leonard, deepening his resolve to make things right. Amelia unexpectedly appeared at Leonard's office, hoping to reconcile. "I overreacted," she admitted. "But we had something good, Leonard. Don't throw it away." Leonard shook his head. It's not about you, Amelia. I need to fix something from my past before I can think about the future. Though hurt, Amelia seemed to understand. I hope you find what you're looking for, she said before leaving. Clara, learning of Leonard's continued involvement, confronted him outside the restaurant. You need to stop, she said. My life is none of your concern. It is now, Leonard replied. You were there for me when I had nothing. Let me be here for you. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she held firm. Don't make promises you can't keep, Leonard. I won't let you hurt Alex. Despite Clara's warnings, Leonard quietly set up a trust fund for Alex and paid off Clara's remaining debts. He ensured his actions were anonymous, hoping to ease her burden without causing more conflict. When Clara discovered what he had done, she was furious, but also deeply moved. For the first time, she considered the possibility that Leonard's intentions were genuine. Leonard waited outside Clara's apartment, bracing himself for what would likely be another confrontation. When she appeared, carrying grocery bags and wearing her usual guarded expression, he stepped forward. Clara, please, he began. I need to say something, and I won't take up much of your time. She sighed, setting the bags down. What now, Leonard? Another grand gesture? No, he said quietly. I just want to apologize. For everything. For not understanding why you left, for not trying harder to find you, and for assuming I had the right to question your choices. Clara's lips parted slightly, surprised by his humility. You're right, she replied after a moment. You didn't understand. But maybe I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth back then. Leonard nodded, grateful for the small opening. Let me help now, Clara. Not because I think you need saving, but because I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. Her gaze softened. We'll see, she said, picking up her bags and heading inside. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Leonard's apology had struck a chord she hadn't expected. For years, she had convinced herself that cutting ties with him was the only way to protect her family and, later, Alex. But his persistence made her question if she had been too rigid, too afraid to let anyone back into her life. As she stared at the ceiling, memories of their past flooded her mind, their late-night talks, his relentless ambition, and the warmth he once brought to her life. She hadn't let herself feel these emotions in years, and the intensity of them left her both uneasy and hopeful. One evening, Alex fell ill with a high fever. Clara rushed him to the emergency room, panic gripping her as she struggled to stay calm. She had no family nearby and limited resources, and the situation felt overwhelming. To her shock, Leonard arrived at the hospital shortly after. Mrs. Jenkins, the babysitter, had called him when she saw Clara rushing out with Alex. Leonard stayed by Clara's side throughout the ordeal, offering quiet support as doctors attended to Alex. When the crisis passed, Clara sat beside Alex's hospital bed, tears streaming down her face. Leonard placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You're not alone, Clara, he said softly. For the first time, she let herself believe him. Amelia, still grappling with her feelings for Leonard, decided to visit him one last time. She found him at his office, reviewing paperwork for the trust fund he had set up for Alex. Leonard, she said, her voice steady. I came to say goodbye. I see now that your heart is somewhere else. Leonard looked up, surprised but grateful for her honesty. I never meant to hurt you, Amelia. You deserve someone who can give you their full attention, and I have things I need to fix. She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "Good luck, Leonard. I hope you find what you're looking for." In the weeks that followed, Leonard discovered more about Clara's life. She had been quietly helping other single mothers in her community, organizing food drives and mentoring young women who were struggling to balance work and parenthood. Her selflessness inspired him, and he realized how much he admired her resilience. She wasn't just surviving, she was making a difference, even with the limited resources she had. One evening, Leonard joined her at a community event, watching as she distributed supplies and comforted those in need. "You're incredible, Clara," he said afterward. "I don't know how you do it." She smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "You just do what needs to be done." Leonard decided to honor Clara's efforts in a way she couldn't ignore. He hosted a charity gala, inviting prominent figures from his business world, but the true star of the event was Clara. When he called her to the stage to accept a donation for her community work, Clara was visibly moved. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Just keep being you," Leonard replied, his eyes filled with admiration. After the gala, Clara and Leonard shared a quiet moment on the balcony. The city lights stretched out before them, and the air was filled with a sense of possibility. "I don't know if I can let you back in," Clara said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I'm not asking for anything," Leonard assured her. "I just want to be here, however you'll let me." She looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "Maybe we can try, as friends." Leonard smiled, understanding her hesitation but hopeful for the first time in years. One evening, Alex presented Leonard with a hand-drawn card. Inside was a simple message: "Thank you for helping my mom. You're a hero to me." Leonard's throat tightened as he read the words. He realized that Alex's acceptance was the final piece of the puzzle, the bridge between him and Clara. Leonard proposed again, but this time there was no grand spectacle. Instead, he knelt in the park where Clara often brought Alex to play. "This isn't about fixing the past," he said. "It's about building a future with you and Alex." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the ring, a symbol not of wealth but of love and resilience. The story ended where it began, at the restaurant where Leonard first saw Clara again. This time, they were seated together as a family, laughing and enjoying a meal. The waitstaff looked on, unaware of the history between them, seeing only a happy trio. Leonard squeezed Clara's hand under the table, grateful for the second chance he had been given. Clara smiled back, finally allowing herself to believe in a brighter future.